Done on television were news shows, and since we're newsmen, we thought we'd start there. This is how it was at the beginning, a picture of a correspondent saying words. We'll talk about the issues that gripped America in the 50s later on, but first, news broadcasting techniques. It's just a radio studio with a camera and a correspondent reading words. Just radio with pictures. But pictures demand movement, so the correspondent, Edward Morgan, makes a concession to motion. He gets up.
Likes to be forced to play host to a foreign power.
He goes to the other side of the desk. He continues to read the news.
The trouble is that it comes at such a dangerous time. And
Radio plus still pictures came next.
Estimate as to the number of cabs operating at noon today, 80%.
Douglas Edwards, the nightly CBS TV News. He does a kind of show and tell with some still photos that just happened to show up that evening.
And all right, in the same mood, we have some new pictures just received of Bonnie Prince Charlie, the future King of England. He's quite a growing boy now. Today he was 19 weeks old, I should have said. Looking very fine here, playing with his little bunny rabbit. And I would say that this perhaps is my favorite of Bonnie King Charlie to be of the United Kingdom.
When it came to film for news programs, there were problems right at the start. Camera crews cost a lot of money. It was cheaper to buy films from newsreel companies than to hire crews. And what television news producers really liked was an active film of troubles. Anytime there was a riot and a fight, it got on the news. Even if there wasn't much news value, a nice riot in an obscure place made good television.
Well, now we have some very, very dramatic pictures made by Telenews on recent Atlantic-packed riots up in Iceland. These are scenes of communist demonstrators as they battled police at Parliament Square.
The sounds you hear of crowds roaring are being added live by a radio sound effects man in the same studio with Doug Edwards. The newsreel tradition also demanded that colorful music be added to make the stories exciting. Doug Edwards is about to introduce a story from the Orient, and so somebody jockeying discs in the news studio put up a record recalling Fu Manchu.
From China, films of the national government delegates leaving for peace negotiations with the communists up in Beiping, former Minister of the Interior. And this is the Vice Chief of Staff of National Defense, the Minister of Justice.
And how did the anchorman know who these people were? Because the newsreels that took this film didn't send correspondents with their cameramen. Well, the standard practice was the man taking the pictures would ask somebody near him, hey, who are those guys? So often, the names of the people came back all wrong.
Australia. A British newsman reports that romance...
There's an even cheaper way to get film, and that's to accept a government handout. The Defense Department always had a lot of film they were anxious to have Americans see. In the middle of the Cold War, you'd often get handouts like this, with picture and information supplied by the government. Here's unchecked propaganda disguised as news.
From the Air Force today, first film of an historic non-stop flight to the North Pole and back.
At Loring Air Force Base in Maine, the B-52 pilots are briefed on their mission to show the world in time of crisis the power of the Air Force. Destination, the North Pole, hitting a mythical target en route, then fly back non-stop to strategic air command bases in the United States. The families wait out the long hours. It's the longest non-stop flight in jet history. They've flown non-stop up to 17,000 miles, up to 32 hours in the air, and prove that the Air Force can deliver nuclear bombs anywhere.
The government's ideas, the government's film. Early television almost died a mourning. TV news was unsuccessful compared to radio. In 1951, there were fewer news broadcasts on television than in 1948. In the early days of the Cold War, the TV networks didn't have enough money to send newsmen abroad, and the Russians kept the few American correspondents in Moscow on a tight rein. So clips like this made primetime newscasts.
Just back from Russia, Mrs. Pearl Mester is greeted by her good friend Margaret Truman, and the former Luxembourg minister brought back some very vivid impressions.
I've been asked many times about the standard of living in Russia compared with America. Naturally, the standard here is far, far superior to anything in Russia. They have 4 and 5 families living in 2 or 3 rooms, and you know, here in America, how we live.
In a short time, just a couple of years, vaudevillians like Burns and Allen were matched by the first generation of TV song and dance men, Art Carney and Jackie Gleason in their salad days.
We'll be traveling side by side like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Damon and Pythias, the wonderful friendship this is. You're my pal, you're a tonic for my morale. As we paddle up life's canal, it's guys like you who make it swell. I think you're really great, and with Norton you'll always rate. Besides, I know you're influential. You carry lots of weight. Lots of weight, lots of weight, lots of weight. Like a fellow in the jam needs a brother, and like a baby in the crib needs a mother, everybody seems to need one another. Another gem.
Meet your babysitter.
Say, kids, what time is it? Oh, well, howdy doody, kids.
Stand by for Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
If you grew up in the 50s, and 40 million of you did, these are the kinds of shows that took care of the afternoon hours. In the 1950s, television came to dominate the non-sleep, non-school time of the American child. It still does. TV is probably the greatest source of common experience in the lives of kids, along with homes and schools. From the beginning, kids' shows have been praised for educating and damned for teaching the wrong things. The very earliest kids' shows were just 1930 westerns, bought by the pound, and full of the violence that an earlier generation had seen every Saturday afternoon at the local movie house. The prints were so scratched they looked as if they'd been filmed in the rain. From the beginning, there was the constant worry of parents that kids would learn violence from TV. And that argument always gets coupled with the argument that there's something, well, wrong about playing commercials right at kids, making them make their parents buy something nobody needs. Both debates still go on.
Every ring is bright, colorful, and there are 16 different rings, 16 different pictures. Movie stars, sports stars, cowboys, Indians, jet planes, and giant passenger planes. Trade them with your friends. Collect all 16 rings.
But there's something else that has to be said, that television is the most powerful tool to teach youngsters that has ever been devised. When children's shows moved from old cheap films to new cheap studio shows, the producers begged you to use imagination for the budget they didn't have.
All aboard, whoops, tunnel coming up, everybody duck way now.
We're not going to show you much of these old shows. Why betray memory? Your imagination is brighter than these old kinescopes.
Coming into my hometown, Imagination Town, and here we are. Tom Corbett, Space Cadet.
Here was Mother Goose for the eye, your voyage to the outer reaches of your mind. And when you look at this...